In this video, I'm walking you through how to do Flexion Abdominals Arm Glides. So for Flexion Abdominals position, you're going to need a yoga block, you're going to need a little bit of wall, and you may want to put a cushion underneath your head as well. In this video, I'm not going to walk you through how to do Flexion Abdominals position. I'm going to be guiding you through the arm glides part of the movement. So if Flexion Abdominals is a position that you're not quite sure about, you haven't done it before, or you need a recap before you do the arm glides, then please do make sure you have a look at my walkthrough video for Flexion Abdominals position. So I will not be walking you through the ins and outs of that part, but it is a very crucial part of the exercise. You also may want to consider what you're wearing, what floor you're on, and if you're on a yoga mat or not. So I've got rid of my yoga mats because we're going to be gliding our arms forward and backwards on the floor like this. And when I have my yoga mat, it's a bit sticky, so my arms don't move quite so well. So do just bear that in mind. Okay, so we're getting ourselves into our Flexion Abdominals position. I'll put my microphone on my chest. And then with this, my block is going in between my knees. My shins are at parallel with the floor, so not too low, not too high. And I'm really making sure that my toes are not off out to the side. So my toes, my ankles, my knees and my hips are in alignment. I'm basically in a squat position, and I'm going to be squeezing the block in between my knees whilst trying to relax my belly. So this Flexion Abdominals position is really putting some strong work into my inner thighs, my adductors, but also my hip flexors as well. We're going to try and make sure that we're not lifting and tucking our bottom up like this. We're keeping the tailbone, the coccyx on the floor, even trying to roll the pelvis forward slightly to really close up the front of the hip joint so that we really feel our hip flexors working hard, as well as hopefully our inner thighs as well. Maintaining that squeeze on the block. I'm going to walk you through the arm glides part of the exercise now, but we're going to do it one arm at a time, and then we're going to draw the exercise together so that we'll do both of the arms at the same time if your body can do that. So I'm squeezing on that block, rolling my pelvis forwards to engage my hips and to balance my pelvis. And we're going to do an exercise now that's really going to help wake up your mid-back muscles and get your shoulders gliding a bit better. I am spreading my hands really, really nice and wide. I am going to do this one at a time, by the way. So my hands are spreading wide, and I'm trying to keep the back of my hands, the back of my wrist, and the back of my elbows on the floor. I don't want to see this happening, because if this is happening, you're not opening up your upper arm here. You're compensating with your wrist. So we're really trying to pin the wrist down, keep those hands spreading nice and wide whilst also keeping the elbows bent. And you're going to have to use your judgment here. This exercise is quite a difficult one. If your arms are really like this, or if your shoulders are just really rounded up off the floor, there are other exercises that I would recommend doing. This exercise requires a certain level of function in order for it to really have much of a beneficial impact on your body. So if your arm is just way far off the floor when you're trying to have it open in this cactus position, it's probably not the exercise for you at the moment. Okay, so one arm at a time is also going to make it easier to do that grounding through both sides. It might be that you just put your other arm on your belly and just focus on the one arm at a time. That is fine. My fingers are spreading super wide, and I'm really trying to almost push backwards into the floor with the backs of my arms. So notice that's not happening, but I am activating the back of my hand, the back of my forearm, the back of my upper arm, and the back of my shoulder. I'm pushing backwards down into the floor here to activate what we call the posterior chain of muscles, the rear muscles of the arm. And these muscles are often ones that get super dysfunctional when we're like rounded forward at our desk for long periods of the day. And what we are going to try and do really nice and slowly, without losing that downward push that we are doing here, we are going to try and draw our elbow into the side of our body. But as we do that, we're trying really hard not to lift the wrist up off the floor to get there. And we're also trying really hard not to contort our rib cage either. So what you might notice is that as you draw, in my case, my left elbow towards my left waist, you might notice that you have a tendency to kind of sideways shift your rib cage, or maybe lift your rib cage up to the ceiling. And what I want is for your rib cage to stay still, for your rib cage to stay facing the ceiling. And what we're going to do is only move our arm as far as we can before we start feeling like we're starting to recruit a bit of a rib cage twist to get ourselves further. That's your rib cage compensating because you don't have the function in your shoulder. And we're trying to keep this movement as a shoulder exercise. So yes, you are trying to very slowly draw that elbow in as close to your body as you can, because that's going to help to wake up these mid-back muscles and the tricep muscles and the kind of rotator cuff muscles here more. It's going to help you activate those guys, but not at the expense of the rib cage. So I just don't want the rib cage lifting and twisting. Only take that elbow as far as you can without the rib cage moving, and of course, as ever, without pain. Notice here that as I've drawn this elbow close to my body, that my fingers are still spreading wide, and I'm trying my best to push backwards down onto the floor, but it is certainly challenging to do that. So then I go in the opposite direction, sliding my hands, and I'm keeping my elbows bent like in a diamond shape, trying to keep the backs of my arms along the floor, trying to keep them pushing down to really wake up that posterior chain, keeping that squeeze on the block, and then I'm going to go in the opposite direction. So notice that I'm not doing this, because if you're just flinging your arm up and down, you're not doing it with any mindfulness or intention, and you're not doing it with any kind of backwards grounding into the floor. So this is not about speed. It's about being very slow and deliberate, keeping that hand really nice and active, trying to keep the upper arm, the elbow, the forearm, the wrist, and the hand all engaged backwards into the floor. And arguably the most important part of this range of movement is that drawing in of the elbow towards your waist, because that's going to be what recruits these like mid-back muscles that we're really trying to wake up, that's going to help lengthen your upper back so it's not rounded forwards. So some people will just dance around in this area here, but that's the easy bit of the range of movement. We're really trying to encourage that drawing in towards the sides, but without the rib cage twisting. I'm going to do, for the sake of the video, a minute on this side, just to kind of do a bit more, and then I'm going to do 2 minutes on the other side, and then we're going to draw both the exercises together. So off we go. Squeezing my knees, I'm relaxing my jaw, really trying to get as much of a sweeping motion through my upper arm as possible. So there is a bend at the elbow at all times. I'm stretching my armpit in that bit, and I'm really contracting and working my armpit in that bit, spreading my fingers wide, stretch off my palm, pushing backwards into the floor to really help engage the posterior arm muscles, posterior shoulder muscles, posterior back muscles. Notice how slowly I'm going here and deliberately. I probably went a little bit too far then because my hands started lifting up off the floor. No contorting through the rib cage. There's no movement through the pelvis either. 3, 2, 1. Okay, so the other side. You might notice wild differences from side to side, and that's okay. They will start getting better the more you do this exercise. So you're not going to be able to see my other arm, but that's okay. I'll walk you through the verbal cues, and actually sometimes just hearing it is more beneficial for you because you're not busy watching me, you're kind of focusing on your own body. So resting that left arm if you want to, or you can still have it in a cactus position if that feels good. My right arm is at a cactus position, my palm is facing up to the ceiling, I'm spreading my fingers nice and wide, and before I do any movement on that right hand side, I'm trying to get that push back down into the ground. So I'm pushing the back of my right hand, the back of my right wrist, the back of my right forearm, and the back of my right upper arm and shoulder blade into the floor, really trying to push backwards to engage those posterior muscles. And then nice and slowly, keeping my elbow bent in a kind of diamond shape, I'll set my timer now. I'm taking my right arm behind my head, trying to keep the backs of the arm fully against the floor. And nice and slowly, I'm going to draw that right elbow in towards my right wrist, my right waist, without contorting my rib cage and without lifting my wrist up off the floor. You might have a much, much smaller range of movement than me, and that is absolutely fine. I really don't care how far you're moving here. I'm not caring how fast you're moving here. I care about how you're creating this movement. So if you are trying to move your arm a lot, but you're not being active through your hand, your wrist is not grounded on the floor, if you're contorting your rib cage all over the place to create that shoulder glide, then you're compensating too much. The cost is too high. We don't care how much of a range of movement you really have at this point, even if it feels pretty humbling. You care about what is doing the movement. And the whole purpose of my job is to teach you guys how to move with less compensation and how to move with more function. And if you are getting led away by your ego and trying to move your arm just for the sake of moving it rather than how you're moving it, what you will do is you will build strength into compensation rather than building strength into function. So I'm going really nice and slowly. My hand is really spreading wide. The backs of my hand, my wrist and my arms and my shoulder blades are on the floor pushing backwards, and I'm making sure not to neglect that real tucking in towards the waist, where I'm going to wake up the lats and the mid-back muscles a little bit more, but I'm not going so close to my waist with my elbow that I contort my rib cage. Okay, that is time. We are going to do a final minute here where we're going to do both arms at the same time. However, if your wrists are like this as you do it, please don't try and do both arms at once. Keep focusing on other shoulder function, other arm function exercises first, and eventually you will be able to do this. There is no point just barking up the wrong tree. This is a difficult exercise that requires a certain degree of straightness through your upper back and a certain degree of function through your arms and shoulders. So don't expect that you'll be able to do both of these at the same time. Okay, off we go. So we're going to do like this. The backs of the arms stay on the floor, actively pushing down a little bit. The backs of the wrists stay on the floor. The knees are squeezing into the block. Toes, ankles, knees and hips in alignment. The pelvis rolls forwards so that we're keeping that coccyx grounded on the floor rather than tucking up and lifting away like this. It's just putting the work into your hips to help balance your pelvis. And at the same time that we're balancing your pelvis and balancing your kind of lumbar vertebrae, you're also going to be balancing your rib cage, lengthening your upper back, opening your chest, repositioning your shoulders. Most importantly, as ever, you're not doing exercises that cause you pain or you reduce the range of movement that you're trying to do so that there's no pain. And we don't forget our breathing. So you're breathing in and out of your nose, relaxing your jaw and breathing into your belly. There's a lot going on in this one. Don't say I didn't warn you. So that's the end. We did flexion abdominals, arm glides, unilateral to start with. So that means one side at a time. And then we did the arm glides both at the same time like that. Hope you enjoyed.